Welcome. What you are about to watch is not science fiction, and it is not folklore. It is a serious investigation into one of history's most compelling unresolved questions, the mystery of the Ariel School UFO Landing, when 62 schoolchildren in Zimbabwe saw a UFO land and beings emerged. Across the world, in universities, research institutes, and field excavations, serious scholars are wrestling with evidence that does not fit the accepted story. Evidence that has been documented, measured, and peer-reviewed, and that still has no satisfying conventional explanation. We are going to look at that evidence carefully, without prejudice in either direction. Not dismissing what is extraordinary, but not accepting it without scrutiny either. The truth, as always, is in the details. On the morning of September 16, 1994, during a break period at Ariel Primary School in Ruwa, Zimbabwe, 62 children between the ages of 6 and 12 left the school building and went to play on the grounds. What they reported next was extraordinary. They saw multiple craft descend from the sky and land in the brush outside the school grounds. Then, they said, small beings with large eyes emerged from the craft. The beings stood and appeared to communicate with some of the children through eye contact, a communication that several children described as terrifying, conveying a message about environmental destruction and the dangerous direction of human civilization. The craft then departed. What makes the Ariel School incident unique in the vast literature of reported UFO encounters is the quality of the witnesses. 62 children independently reported the same core experience. They had been outdoors when it happened, with no teacher supervision. The teachers were at a meeting. They had no access to television or American UFO media in rural Zimbabwe in 1994. Their conceptual frame for extraterrestrial life was essentially zero. They did not coordinate their accounts with each other before being interviewed separately. When Harvard psychiatrist Dr. John Mack, one of the most eminent researchers on anomalous experiences, traveled to Zimbabwe and interviewed the children weeks after the event, he found their accounts remarkably consistent, their psychological state genuinely affected by what they had experienced, and their reports to him given without any suggestive questioning, closely matching the accounts they had given to their teachers immediately after the event. Dr. Mack spent years investigating the case and considered it among the most important UFO encounters he had encountered in his research. The children are now adults. Some have been re-interviewed in the decades since the event. Their accounts remain consistent. Some have experienced lasting psychological effects. One woman, interviewed in the 2022 documentary Ariel Phenomenon, describes how the experience changed her life. The communication she received that day about environmental destruction became a life-guiding message. The 62 children of Ariel School are now in their 30s and 40s, and they still say the same thing they said in 1994. Something landed, something came out, and it looked at them. This is where our investigation begins. Stay with us, because the further we go into the evidence, the more extraordinary it becomes. The story you think you know is only the surface. Beneath it lies something far more remarkable. Let us begin. Before we go further, if you are finding this investigation compelling, please take a moment right now to like this video, drop a comment below with your thoughts, and share it with someone who loves a good historical mystery. If you are watching on YouTube, hit subscribe and tap the bell icon so you never miss a new episode. If you found us through Facebook, tap follow on our page. It takes just a few seconds, and it genuinely helps us keep making these documentaries. Now, let us get back to the investigation. Before we examine the specific evidence, we need to step back and understand the context. This case does not exist in isolation. It sits within the landscape of modern documented mysteries, and to properly evaluate what we are looking at, we need to understand the broader picture that surrounds it. Governments keep secrets. This is not a conspiracy theory. It is documented fact, confirmed by declassified archives, freedom of information disclosures, and the confessions of officials long after the events in question. The United States government ran secret programs to test psychedelic drugs on unwitting civilians, culture, to spy on its own citizens, COINTELPRO, and to cover up nuclear testing incidents that killed American soldiers. The British government suppressed information about UFO encounters by military personnel for decades. The Soviet Union systematically falsified scientific data to maintain ideological conformity. None of this means that every government secret involves supernatural phenomena or alien contact. The reality of classified programs is almost always more mundane. Military technology being tested covertly, intelligence operations that cannot be publicly acknowledged, or simply the bureaucratic instinct to classify first and justify later. Most UFO sightings that turn out to have official explanations were classified aircraft. Most government denials of anomalous phenomena are straightforwardly honest. The phenomena being denied are simply not real. But the documented history of government secrecy has a practical effect on investigative credibility. When officials deny knowledge of events that witnesses describe in compelling detail, that denial cannot be taken at face value without independent corroboration. The proven track record of institutional concealment means that institutional denial, however authoritative it sounds, is not the same as evidence of absence. This complicates every modern mystery that touches on official narrative. This context matters because it tells us something important. What we are about to investigate is not an isolated curiosity. It is part of a pattern that researchers in multiple fields have been independently documenting for decades. And patterns in science demand explanation. With that foundation in place, let us now turn to the specific case at hand. Now we reach the heart of the matter. The core evidence surrounding the Ariel School UFO Landing, when 62 schoolchildren in Zimbabwe saw a UFO land and beings emerged, is more extensive, more verified, and more troubling for conventional explanations than most people realize. Let us walk through it systematically, fact by fact, and allow the evidence to speak for itself. We are not going to speculate here. Every point that follows is documented in peer-reviewed publications, official archaeological records, or government archives that are publicly accessible. The question is not whether these facts are real. The question is what they mean. Consider this first extraordinary detail. Ariel Primary School in Ruwa, Zimbabwe, approximately 20 kilometers east of Harare, was in 1994 a school serving primarily white and mixed-race children of middle-class families during the post-independence period of Zimbabwe. The school had approximately 250 students and was a respected institution with a professional staff. On September 16, 1994, during the morning break, approximately 10:15 a.m., the incident was first reported by children returning to classrooms who were in a state of evident agitation and told teachers that they had seen craft and beings in the brush beyond the school grounds. This single data point, if taken in isolation, might be set aside. Anomalies happen, instruments malfunction, researchers make mistakes. But as we continue, you will see that this is not an isolated anomaly. It is part of a consistent and documented pattern. But that is only the beginning. Researchers also discovered the initial investigation was conducted by Cynthia Hind, a Zimbabwean UFO researcher and correspondent for the Mutual UFO Network, MUFON, who interviewed the children, their parents, and the teachers at the school within days of the incident. Hind had children draw pictures of what they had seen, drawings that showed consistent craft shapes, disc or elliptical, with windows or portholes, and small figures with large eyes. The drawings, produced independently by different children, showed remarkable similarity in the basic elements, despite the children not having coordinated on the artistic details. Now, a skeptic might propose an alternative explanation for this. And that is entirely reasonable. We should always test alternative explanations before accepting extraordinary ones. The problem is that the alternative explanations, when examined carefully, create more problems than they solve. The mystery deepens when we examine. Dr. John Edward Mack, 1929-2004, was a Pulitzer Prize-winning Harvard Medical School psychiatrist and professor who became known for his research into people reporting experiences of alien abduction. His 1994 book Abduction: Human Encounters with Aliens presented detailed case studies and argued that the abduction phenomenon was psychologically real, meaning the people reporting it were not lying or psychotic, and could not be easily explained by conventional psychological or neurological mechanisms. Mack traveled to Zimbabwe in late 1994, specifically to investigate the Ariel School case, and spent 3 days interviewing the children. He described the case as exceptional in the consistency and credibility of the witnesses. This is where the conventional account begins to strain. Each individual fact might be dismissed or minimized in isolation, but the cumulative weight of the evidence is another matter entirely. Perhaps most remarkable of all, Dr. Mack's interviews with the Ariel School children were filmed and have been partially released. The filmed interviews show children speaking calmly and clearly, without apparent distress, about the core facts of what they saw, while showing genuine fear when discussing the eye contact with the beings. Several children independently described the same communication content. The beings conveyed, through eye contact, concern about environmental damage and human technology. One girl, later identified as Emily Trim, has become the most articulate adult spokesperson for the Ariel witnesses and has spoken publicly about the incident at multiple international venues, including the United Nations. Researchers who have examined this evidence have described it as genuinely difficult to explain within the accepted framework. These are not fringe commentators. They are credentialed academics publishing in mainstream journals, raising questions that the field has not yet satisfactorily answered. Then there is the matter of the BBC covered the Ariel School incident in 1994 and aired a report that included interviews with the children and with the school's headmaster, Colin Mackey, who stated that he believed the children were telling the truth about what they had experienced. The BBC report established the incident's credibility in international media at the time and created a contemporary record. The children's testimony in the BBC footage, filmed just days after the event, is consistent with the accounts they gave to Hind and Mack, and with the accounts they give in adult interviews decades later. What makes this particularly significant is its independence from the previous points. This is not a case of one theory requiring another. These are separate lines of evidence converging on the same uncomfortable conclusion. Adding to the enigma is this finding: the 2022 documentary Ariel Phenomenon, directed by Randall Nickerson, who spent 17 years making the film, collected contemporary footage and adult testimonies from Ariel School witnesses, and provides the most comprehensive single record of the case. The documentary includes footage of Mack's 1994 interviews, drawings made by the children at the time, and in-depth adult interviews with multiple former students. Several of the adults interviewed describe lasting psychological effects from the experience, including heightened environmental awareness and changes in worldview that they attribute to the communication they received from the beings. Taken together, these facts form a pattern that cannot be explained by coincidence, misidentification, or methodological error. Each piece of evidence has been examined by skeptics. Each has been subjected to alternative explanations, and in each case, the alternative explanation falls short of accounting for everything that has been documented. We are left with a body of evidence that demands explanation and an accepted narrative that does not provide one. This is where serious inquiry begins. Now that we have established the evidence, we need to examine the theories that researchers have proposed to explain the Ariel School UFO Landing. When 62 schoolchildren in Zimbabwe saw a UFO land and beings emerged. This is where the debate becomes most intense, because the theories reflect not just different interpretations of the same evidence, but fundamentally different assumptions about what is possible and what the past looked like. Understanding these theories is not just an academic exercise. Each one has been championed by serious researchers with genuine credentials, and each one captures something that the others miss. The truth, if it is ever established, will likely draw on elements of several. The first major explanation proposed by researchers holds that the genuine UFO event theory holds that the Ariel School children observed one or more genuine unconventional craft and their occupants. Under this interpretation, the consistency of 62 independent witnesses in a culture with minimal UFO media saturation, the inability of investigators to identify terrestrial aircraft or other explanations, and the lasting psychological impact on the witnesses all support the conclusion that something physically real and non-terrestrial was observed. Proponents, including John Mack, argued that the Ariel case was among the strongest evidence for a real UFO phenomenon because it involved multiple simultaneous witnesses of widely varying ages who had no incentive to fabricate a coordinated story. This interpretation has significant academic support and is backed by substantial evidence, but it is not without problems. Critics point out that it requires assumptions that go beyond what the evidence strictly supports, and that key predictions of this theory have not been confirmed by subsequent research. It remains contested, and the contest is productive. A rival school of thought argues that the mass hysteria/social contagion theory proposes that the event began with one child seeing something, possibly a light aircraft, bird, or other conventional object, and reporting it in dramatic terms. And that other children, excited and in an unstructured play period, adopted and amplified the story through social contagion. Under this model, the consistency of accounts reflects not independent observation of the same thing, but the social transmission of a story that rapidly became fixed in its details. This theory is consistent with the known psychology of mass hysteria in schools and other institutional settings, where emotionally compelling narratives can spread and be accepted as personal experience. This theory is controversial, and deliberately so. Its proponents argue that the evidence demands an explanation outside the conventional framework. Critics counter that extraordinary claims require extraordinary evidence, and that the evidence presented, while suggestive, does not yet meet that standard. The debate continues in peer-reviewed literature. Perhaps the most unconventional theory suggests that the government drone/military aircraft theory proposes that what the children observed was a classified or experimental aircraft testing program, possibly a drone or unconventional aircraft operating from a nearby military installation. Zimbabwe in 1994 was a period of significant regional military activity in sub-Saharan Africa. The Rwandan genocide was happening, South Africa was transitioning politically, and various parties had interests in surveillance operations in the region. Under this model, the beings may have been remote-operated robotic figures or unusual-appearing personnel, and the subsequent lack of official acknowledgement reflects the classified nature of the program. This theory is speculative and has no evidential support. What is striking about this debate is not merely that experts disagree. That is normal and healthy in science. What is striking is the quality of the disagreement. Serious researchers, working from the same body of evidence, reaching genuinely different conclusions. That level of fundamental disagreement, when it persists over decades, is a signal that something important has not yet been understood. The question is not which of these theories is right. The question is whether any of them is right, or whether the truth is something that none of the current frameworks has yet been able to capture. The case surrounding the Ariel School UFO Landing, when 62 schoolchildren in Zimbabwe saw a UFO land and beings emerged, does not rest on speculation alone. What distinguishes this investigation from pure mythology is the existence of documented, physical, verifiable evidence, material that has been examined by credentialed researchers and whose authenticity is not seriously disputed. What is disputed is its interpretation. Let us review the most significant documented evidence, as objectively as possible. We are not going to cherry-pick the data that supports a preferred conclusion. We are going to lay out what exists and let you draw your own assessment. Physical evidence supporting this account includes the contemporary drawings made by children in the days immediately after the incident, collected by Cynthia Hind and published in her 1994 investigation report, provide evidence that was created before any media saturation could influence the children's depictions. The drawings show consistent craft shapes and figure descriptions that were not characteristic of African UFO folklore, which did not prominently feature the gray alien archetype that dominated American UFO media. The spontaneous production of similar drawings by children who had not compared their work is consistent with independent observation of the same thing. This evidence has been subjected to independent verification. Skeptics have examined it. Alternative explanations have been proposed and tested. The data remains. The question of what it means remains open. Investigators have documented the filmed testimonies from 1994, the BBC report, and Mack's recorded interviews provide a contemporary record against which the adult testimonies decades later can be compared. The consistency between the 1994 accounts and the adult accounts given in the 2022 Ariel Phenomenon documentary is striking. The same details, craft size, being appearance, eye contact, environmental message, appear in accounts separated by nearly 30 years. This long-term consistency is difficult to explain by false memory, which typically degrades with time, or coached testimony, which would require sustained coordination over decades. This evidence has been subjected to independent verification. Skeptics have examined it. Alternative explanations have been proposed and tested. The data remains. The question of what it means remains open. On-site analysis revealed the absence of any identified conventional explanation, despite investigation by a Harvard psychiatrist, multiple UFO researchers, a BBC documentary team, and the Zimbabwean authorities, is evidence by exclusion. No nearby aircraft was identified, no known animal or plant explains the described sightings, and no evidence of social contagion, such as a prior story circulating in the school, was found. While absence of explanation is not the same as presence of extraordinary evidence, the failure of serious investigators over 3 decades to identify a conventional explanation increases the case's standing as a genuine anomaly. This evidence has been subjected to independent verification. Skeptics have examined it. Alternative explanations have been proposed and tested. The data remains. The question of what it means remains open. Each individual piece of evidence might, in principle, be explained away. A single anomalous artifact might be misidentified. A single anomalous date might reflect contamination. A single anomalous eyewitness account might reflect misperception. The question is whether all of the evidence can be explained away, and whether the explanations required are more or less plausible than the evidence itself. When multiple independent lines of inquiry converge on the same conclusion, that convergence is the most powerful signal in empirical science. And that is exactly what we are seeing here. We have examined the history, the evidence, and the theories surrounding the Ariel School UFO Landing, when 62 schoolchildren in Zimbabwe saw a UFO land and beings emerged. Now we need to ask the question that is sometimes overlooked in discussions of ancient mysteries. Why does this matter? What does it mean for us today? It would be easy to file this away as an interesting historical curiosity, a puzzle from a distant past with no bearing on our present lives. That would be a fundamental mistake. The questions raised by this case touch on issues that are directly relevant to who we are, where we came from, and what the human story actually looks like before the period covered by conventional history. The Ariel School case remains one of the most discussed cases in UFO research due to the quality and number of witnesses and the credibility of the investigators involved. The 2022 documentary Ariel Phenomenon brought the case to a new international audience and has been described as one of the most compelling UFO documentaries produced. Several former Ariel students have become public advocates for environmental causes, citing their experience and the communication they say they received as the foundation of their environmental activism. The case has been used by researchers including John Mack and his Harvard-based program for Extraordinary Experience Research, PEER, as a model for investigating anomalous experiences without dismissing them a priori. Mack's methodological approach, treating witness accounts with the same respect a psychiatrist gives to patient accounts of any experience, has been influential in shifting the academic study of UFO encounters from debunking to phenomenological inquiry. The Ariel case, with its school setting, multiple simultaneous child witnesses, and long-term follow-up potential, is considered uniquely valuable in this research tradition. Furthermore, the tools available to investigate these questions are advancing rapidly. Satellite imaging, ground-penetrating radar, ancient DNA analysis, isotopic tracing, and deep-sea sonar are all providing capabilities that previous generations of researchers could only dream of. Cases that were genuinely unresolvable 10 years ago are now open to new analysis, and the findings, consistently, are expanding rather than contracting the mystery. The investigation continues. New discoveries are being made. New analyses are being published. New voices are entering the conversation from disciplines that were not previously part of the discussion. The answers, when they come, and they will come, will not merely solve a historical puzzle. They will force a fundamental revision of assumptions that underpin our entire understanding of human history and human potential. We have now walked through the complete case of the Ariel School UFO Landing, when 62 schoolchildren in Zimbabwe saw a UFO land and beings emerged. From the historical record, through the physical evidence, across the competing theories, and into the modern significance of what remains unresolved. What the story of Ariel School UFO ultimately reveals is not just a historical puzzle, it is a mirror. It reflects our assumptions back at us, our assumptions about what ancient people were capable of, about how knowledge is gained and lost across the centuries, and about the relationship between what we know and what we merely think we know. The evidence presented in this documentary is real. The questions it raises are genuine. The debate among researchers is ongoing, and that is healthy. Science is not a set of conclusions. It is a process, and the process requires that we remain open to evidence that challenges what we thought we knew, however uncomfortable that challenge might be. If you came to this documentary as a skeptic, we hope the evidence gave you something to think about. If you came as a true believer, we hope the critical examination gave you a more nuanced picture. The truth, as always, lies in the evidence, not in what we want to be true. Thank you for watching. If this investigation sparked your curiosity, please help us reach more people. If you are watching on YouTube, subscribe to the channel and hit the notification bell so you never miss a new documentary. If you are watching on Facebook, tap the follow button on our page to stay connected. We publish new documentaries every week, covering the full range of historical mysteries that the mainstream has not yet adequately explained. Leave a comment telling us which case you want us to investigate next. The conversation continues. The investigation never ends.